and we will just get cracking by jumping straight into The King's Man. Drew, what's that all about?
Yes, well, 2014's King's Man, The Secret Service, was a decent romp. A comic book action film with a number of good performances, a huge sense of fun, and a number of welcome digs at classism and movie tropes, notably Bond films, even if it itself indulged in quite a few. The sequel, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, was terrible, but still managed some humour and some likeable performances. While there was a gulf in quality, one of the things they had in common was a complete lack of taking themselves seriously. Their stories of a clandestine independent spy agency taking extrajudicial action to protect the world saw them tackling Samuel L. Jackson's scenery-chewing tech mogul, ending with the heads of many of the world's heads of state exploding in multiple colours to the strains of Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance, and in the sequel, defeating Julianne Moore's crazed drug dealer with her robot dogs, Soylent Green hamburgers, and imprisoned Elton John. In this unwanted prequel, which shows the origin story of the Kingsman, something that I don't believe anyone was asking for, the whole thing is entirely serious and involves World War I. You know, the real thing, in which millions of people really died, and which led to World War II, in which even more millions died. Director Matthew Vaughn returns, but notably, and perhaps the reason for such a change in tone, his screenwriting partner in the last two films, Jane Goldman, does not. The script this time being co-penned by former Stranger Things showrunner Carl Gajdusek. I'm guessing at that. My apologies if you're listening and I've butchered it, but then your film, so I don't care. Here, some shadowy, definitely not Spectre honest group wants Europe to go to war and millions to die so that England will be destroyed to make up for 700 years of the English monarchy subjugating Scotland. I really don't know where to begin with that. Whether it's the fact that it was the United Kingdom and not England that was a belligerent in the First World War, that any invading army would be unlikely to stop at the Scottish border, that it suggests a complete lack of knowledge of or interest in the complex history of Scotland and England, that unlike Germany or Russia, the monarchy had little real power in the UK by this point, thankfully, or that the whole thing is just offensive and offensively stupid. Going to go with that one, I think, though. Tying your fictional plot to real-world events, especially ones as significant as World War I, is dangerous at best, but it can be done. Even Wonder Woman managed it reasonably well. But that film sensibly kept its involvement around the edges of the conflict. But this film has the entire war as its plot. Honestly though, Scott, I don't really want to go much beyond this. The biggest problem with this film is it's so bloody boring. It's an absolute trudge. And it's strange because even the second film, there was a lot of fun in it. It had great performances too. It had Colin Firth, who's great fun. Taron Egerton, who's I find really quite charismatic. I like Taron Egerton a lot. In this film, his character, equivalent of his character sort of, is played by Man with Face. I mean, I know he's got a name, but I didn't bother to check it out. Matthew Good doing a not entirely terrible, but not great Scottish accent for some reason. And your man, Aaron Taylor... Oh, sorry, I guess Aaron... Aaron... No, the guy from Kick-Ass, I can't even get to the end of his name, he bores me so much. Him doing a really terrible Scottish accent for some reason. Ralph Fiennes is the founder of the Kingsman, is game enough, I guess, but he's far too good for this. But the real problem is just, it really, as I was saying a bit earlier, it takes itself so seriously. And in the strangest ways too, it's got... So it starts off playing with the fact that the three grandsons of Queen Victoria, Kaiser Wilhelm, George the... Oh God, fifth, I think. I forget now because I don't care. George V and Tsar Nicholas all looked very, very similar. They were cousins, all looked very similar. They grew up together. And so they're all played by Tom Hollander. And I thought, oh, that might be quite fun. And then they do nothing with it at all. So, so that was good. And then they have Rasputin because, well, of course, because nobody's got any imagination. And Rasputin is for some reason played by Rhys Ifans, badly.
The obvious choice.
Yes, the obvious choice, yes. I mean, it's got more to do than being a lizard in that recent Spider-Man film, but, honestly, I think that performance was better. And the film certainly was. But he's playing Rasputin, who is a really weird choice here. At the time Rasputin was around, he had a lot of political enemies. He was considered to have a lot of influence on the Russian royal family. How much he had, not sure, probably quite a lot though, but there were a lot of people trying to besmirch him, and a lot of people saying he was all sorts of deviants and things by which they meant gay. Which I don't believe there's actually a lot of evidence for. He was also accused of several rapes. There's a bit more suggestion that those were true. But there was legendary amounts of evidence for the fact that he was really into women. But the homosexuality thing, that was trying to besmirch him because that was considered a big slight at the time. And it's lasted for a few years. Still, some people think it might be true. Who cares? But for some reason, that's in this film. The suggestion that he likes pretty little boys and stuff. And it's really weird in 2022 to have a film that has that in a character to suggest the, very, very old and fortunately mostly outdated in most people's eyes now idea that homosexuality is something to do with deviance and often paedophilia.
Yeah.
That's a creepy and weird thing to have in a film. Also in this silly comic book film about, robot dogs, as was seen in the last one. And Elton John being kept as a piano-playing slave for Julie Moore's entertainment. I can't believe this film's in the same series. I mean, I thought the first sequel was bad, but oh dear. Yeah, so you've got Rhys Ifans playing Rasputin, and at some point he starts licking Ralph Fiennes' leg in a honestly, and I think deliberately, sort of cunnilingus-like way almost, like suggesting of that. But the film also at the same time, as well as the problems I have with the deviancy thing, and it's suggesting that that's, that and homosexuality are somehow related, which is ridiculous nonsense, of course. But also, the film seems suggesting in this film, in other ways, taking itself seriously, is actually Rasputin's actually magic because he cures this wound in a leg. It's a strange film, Scott. I'll tell you that. And then strange things too, like this guy who's definitely not Blofeld and running this, definitely not Spectre Group, who, when Rasputin gets taken out of the picture, sends in Lenin to help bring about the end of the Russian nobility and take Russia out of the war, which is a strange number. This film, because it doesn't have any interest in history, and see, if this was as daft as the first film, I wouldn't care, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. It's taking itself so seriously. There's no humour in this film at all, or interest, or good performances for the most part, actually. So there's not a lot going on in this film that I like. In fact, nothing. But for maybe Jimon Hunsu, who's Ralph Fiennes' butler sort of thing, but ends up taking up the first role of Merlin, which in the other two films is played by Mark Strong, who A, can do a good Scottish accent, and is B, brilliant because he's Mark Strong. But at least Jimon Hunsu has a base level of charisma. He's generally quite likeable. He's not got a great deal to do here. He's quite likeable, so that helps. But where was it? Yeah, Lenin. So apart from the fact that it seems to take the blame for many things away from Tsar Nicholas, who, let's be scrupulously clear here, was a terrible, terrible person. Like one of the worst people. I mean, probably not as bad as Lenin when you count back now, but terrible person. So it seems to be taking away from his agency in anything that happened. And then, because it brings in Lenin as some pawn of some Blofeld-like character, that's weird because the Russian Revolution may be the single most important political event of the 20th century. And then they make this a plot point in their really stupid film. And it's not actually, this character has no agency. Lenin has no agency. It's such a weird film. And then, God no, it's just bad. It's just so boring. Everything's so serious. It's got Daniel Brühl in it, which means, of course, Daniel Brühl's wasted. Just a very special final FU. I dislike mid-credit scenes anyway, but the mid-credit scene in this film introduces Hitler.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad he's around.
Yeah, that's what, again, the first film ends with the heads of state of the world popping like champagne corks or firework colours in Ed Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance, right? After the tech mogul Samuel Jackson has been killed. It's a ridiculous film, and it knows it. This film is incredibly serious for the entire length of it, and then in the mid-credit scene has Lenin meeting Hitler, and that both Lenin and Hitler work for the Spectre-like organisation.
Avengers Assemble.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can do alternate histories, but they have to sort of like be based on something. This is kind of just offensive because it's like you're dealing with real stuff where people died, like significant numbers of people died,
yeah,
and you're not doing anything interesting. It's like you're actually kind of taking away from the importance of everything else that happened.
It's weird because I've not seen this, but it sounds like it's a twist on the plot from Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows, where it's Moriarty's kind of engineering a world war just to sell weapons. And it sounds like that is a much more coherent and sensible take on it rather than whatever this is trying to do. I haven't seen this. Glad I haven't.
No, it's absolute garbage. It's an absolute trudge to get through. It's so boring. Yeah, I kind of... I don't remember that bothering me while I played Game of Shadows. I quite enjoyed that game. But actually, that kind of works because that's sort of still a thing. The whole military-industrial complex thing. Yeah,
exactly.
Creating wars to sell. So actually, 19th century or early 20th century, I don't see why that would necessarily be any different. That works. This, though, it's like it's creating a world war just so that people will invade England. Like, what?
Yeah. Nuts.
What? I know. Oh God, no! Scott is so bad. And just what a terrible waste of some of the cast, because when we've talked a few times about Ralph Fiennes, he's not always the best guy, and sometimes he's chewing the scenery, sometimes in a good way. In Bruges is the prime example of that. But then I think we all three of us liked him a lot as M in the Bond films.
Yeah.
He's actually pretty sympathetic in The Dig, we talked about last year, that Netflix film about Sutton Hoo. I actually quite like Ralph Fiennes, and here he's doing his best, but he's got so little to work with. It's a terrible script. And then, everybody else is just... because I don't know why they're there. And I'm so fed up with films having Daniel Bruhl in them and then not remembering to use Daniel Bruhl, who's great.
Yeah.
It's a strange and terrible film, and it's a film that I don't believe anybody was asking for, and also seems completely detached from the other films. It's honestly the strangest thing, because the other films are cartoonish, and this is so kind of po-faced and dealing with such serious stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a mess. I'm certainly glad I'm not going to catch up with this one anytime soon now. I still mean to go back to the first one, because I do like Taron Egerton a lot, so the first one sounds like has sounded for years like something I would actually enjoy, but I never quite got around to it. But I'll probably just stop with that one. No, none of them. That's partly why I didn't want to watch this, because I wouldn't have the full intricate backstory of all this.
Yes, that's not there. Like, actually, the few sort of references to the other films, they feel kind of shoehorned in, sort of fan service, but there's not. Honestly, don't think this film has fans, or Series has fans in that way.
Yeah.
I went back to watch, because I'd intended to see this at the cinema when it came out. It's on Disney Plus now. See it at the cinema when it came out Boxing Day, I think. So I'd watched the other two films beforehand first. I liked the original slightly less than I did before, and I wouldn't say I liked The Golden Circle slightly more. I disliked it slightly less. But yeah, it's still really entertaining. Mark Strong is fantastic. The first one's got Michael Caine in it. Small role, but it's Michael Caine. Generally, that's good.
Yeah.
Mark Strong's amazing. Colin Firth, he's an actor kind of like Hugh Grant. And sort of they were always put together for a long time, in like the late 90s in particular, sort of like one man was a cheap man's Hugh Grant, and then after a while Colin Firth sort of surpassed him, and I guess it was the other way around. But yeah, I've come to like Hugh Grant. I've come to like Colin Firth quite a lot more than Hugh Grant. He's got much more range. But so yeah, there's actually a lot to like, and it's a lot of fun. Taron Egerton's really engaging on screen, and then, but it's cartoonish because it's got Samuel L. Jackson as a sort of tech mogul thing with a lisp, and he's chewing the scenery, and people's heads are exploding, and there's like crass anal sex jokes and things, and then in this it's like, no, it's World War One, actual World War One caused actually by these people. Oh God, what are you doing? How is this the same series? It's just strange. That's it. You get sometimes you get tonal whiplash within films. You tend not to get tonal whiplash within like an entire franchise, and this is like the biggest example of that I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's such an awful film. Although, really, for all the ethical issues I have with what they talk about and how they do it, it's like, honestly, it's just the fact that it's so boring is the problem.
Yeah.
No, very much to be avoided.